Across Central Virginia, Joe Thomas in the morning. News Talk 107.5 FM and 1260 AM, WCHV.
It's a pleasure to be of service to you
Derek
this
Greenfield.
Wednesday morning.
He's an
at
educator. He gets into communities and helps, bring positive change and redirect energies towards righting the ship every day. And he's on the line with us to kind of make sense of what seems like a cacophony of racial divisions that come forth. We just heard in Fox News that finally some of the real dangerous tools when it comes to our police department. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for the invitation, Joe.
You work in a lot of really poor inner city communities, in public schools and impoverished areas where families look out the front door and the American dream isn't even a pipe dream to them. A kid growing up and having a job, even a blue collar job, is laughable because our cities have driven out opportunities for employment and self sustainability like crazy. So how do you tell a kid? Because the progressives love to move in there and say, "Don't worry, just vote for me, and I'll send a check in the mail every month." How do you change that opportunity perspective from the inside out?
Well, certainly, I think there's a couple things. One, we need to build relationships. We need folks both in the classroom and on the police force and in government who genuinely do care and want to build relationships and believe in young people. But then we've got to provide resources. Our young people are not at risk; they're at success. They have the potential to be great. They have all the abilities within them. But if you're surrounded by communities that don't have access to jobs and hope, if you're in a school system that's totally underfunded compared to the one that exists across the state, then indeed it's not giving people that same chance. And there's going to be frustration. And there's going to be anger. But I think all young people and families, remember, any community you're talking about, regardless of their economic condition or the situation people find themselves in, they want the best for their children. They want their children to have opportunities for education and jobs. And so we need to make sure that we're providing that hope, quality education, access to opportunity, and then real people that genuinely believe in them. And again, you can a dandelion is a weed or a flower depending on how you look at it. And how you look at it affects how you treat it. And so there's a lot of bias that we all need to recognize within ourselves that can impact how a young person who already might feel under the gun, if a police officer, again, engages in behavior that's questionable, or if someone else just says something that's hurtful, it's magnified because you're already feeling under suspicion, already feeling like you don't have hope. And we've got to provide hope and real treatment to people so they have real chances.
Well, even the uncle of Terrell Robinson out of Madison said, they almost immediately said, no, my nephew was running with the wrong crowd. And fighting off that wrong crowd takes a lot of positive interactions. I've told people who think that there is good and bad, go into a nursery at a hospital and tell me which kid is going to turn out bad. It's so much of our environment that dictates that, Dr. Greenfield. So how have we become more racially divided? We're 50 years post-Selma now. We're 150 years post-Civil War, as we just celebrated the sacking and burning of Scottsville, Virginia, this past weekend by the Union Army. How do we get less racially divided? How do we become more as the years go on? You'd think we'd become better at it. Is this political correctness come to roost, that by not being able to have honest interactions with each other, we become less able to even speak our minds?
Well, I don't believe it's related to political correctness. I think it's correct for us to be thoughtful and sensitive in how we treat each other. But it's time for some real honesty. There are folks, again, you look at the SAE video from University of Oklahoma, there's probably young people who publicly would say, I wouldn't have a negative attitude, but it's harboring there. And we just really need to have honest conversations. And those who are, in dominant groups, whether we're talking about whites, whether we're talking about males or heterosexuals, all groups that have a little bit more social advantage need to be honest about it and to look at themselves and say, what are there attitudes that need to change? Am I getting advantages that not everybody gets? And then not to resist. The Oklahoma Unheard group, the black students from Oklahoma, went to the president months ago and said, we have concerns. We don't feel like we're getting the kind of treatment. We don't see representation in faculty. And the president kind of shrugged it off. Well, chickens have come home to roost. People have said, I've been trying to tell you this. So I think it's for folks who may not even realize they have privilege to be honest about it. I mean, think about it. There's a great study that came out recently, and they put black and white riders onto buses and went up to the bus driver and said, hey, can I get on free? I don't have any money. I apologize. I only need to go a mile. Well, 72% of the white riders were allowed to ride for free, and 36% of black riders. It's twice as likely. So there are these subtle ways in which privilege operates for certain groups. So be honest. If you might be getting it, or if you realize that perhaps other people are getting treatment that just isn't right, how about you just say, you're right. I hear you, and let's talk about it so we can move forward.
Is it? And I want to circle back around to this. Dr. Derek Greenfield has taken some time out with us. Educator, community leader, goes into schools and tries to help heal some of these situations. Where does this responsibility? Because I think it's sometimes too convenient to make it an external issue rather than an internal issue. Can I hold on to you for a moment and come circle back around to you after the break? On the Newsmakers line with us this morning. You can find him online as well at DerekGreenfield.com. Find out more about his work in all these communities around the country. Dr. Greenfield, and I tell my kids this all the time. Number one, they're facing 80 or 90 years of people saying no to them just because that's their official first answer for anything. It's not necessarily because you're black, white, blue, green, or yellow. Also, there are people who are jerks in the world, and I don't know how much of our schism is fanned the flames of those who seek position just for position's sake in our community and are really seeing, an agenda of it, or we're just saying some people just don't get along. How do we deal with this on an internal basis and tell our kids and raise our kids to understand that, you're not going to like everybody and you're not going to get along with everybody?
Yeah, I think it's really powerful that we have this moment of, even though we're come from different points of the political spectrum, we have commonality right here. Joe, we all, and anyone in this movement of social justice says it is ultimately about individual responsibility, that all of us have to realize that stuff's going to happen. If I crumple up a $5 bill, it's still worth $5, and it still has value regardless. But I think the individual responsibility has to go both ways, that those who are in positions of power to recognize how that operates. In Ferguson, that Department of Justice report found that, black drivers were twice as likely to get stopped, but 26% less likely to have contraband. And so that individual accountability say, wait a minute, are there biases that are putting people, therefore getting stopped, more likely to get arrested, then they get a record, can't find jobs, and so the cycle continues, and then we blame people. If you and I are running a race and I start 10 yards in front of you, and I tell you, well, just run as hard as you can and don't worry about it, and I keep bumping into you, certainly, you still have to run as fast as you can, but I need to look at myself too. And so I think everyone on all sides just needs to look at how these things operate so we can create a condition where everyone is treated fairly. There's going to be some injustice. There's going to be some times we don't always get along, but let's work on being honest and saying, maybe I have done you wrong. And let me just listen to you. And when we can sit down, what we find out is we have so much in common, and we all want to go in the same direction.
Well, and I think our economic problems are a bigger problem than a racial problem, because it does come down to that. And the better our lives are, the less likely we are to be looking externally. Don't you think it's fair to say, Dr. Greenfield, to say, and this is where I think our elected officials miss the ball. They're looking for policing policies. Meanwhile, their economic policies have driven out our opportunities. If we can all find work, I couldn't care less what anyone's color or ethnicity or religious beliefs or anything else is, because I can feed my family. But the more desperate those times become, the more you start looking around saying there's got to be a reason, because of course most of us never want to think it might be us, but there's also a real economic side to this, and I think our elected officials are at least bordering on malpractice when it comes to how they administer our communities, because I have rights, you have rights, that's guaranteed by God, and sworn to the Constitution to be defended. I shouldn't need a special order that says you have rights or I have rights. I just want the government to swear to protect them.
And I think it's both and rather than either or. Certainly we do know there's a concept called homosocial reproduction, which means that folks tend to hire people like themselves. And so there are patterns that people may not give the same opportunities to other folks. And that's why, for example, the Rooney Rule in the NFL was put in place to say, look, you need to at least make sure you are thinking about and bringing in a person of color, as a finalist. So at least what we're doing is giving folks access to opportunities and then opening up pipelines. And so really it's making sure these pipelines are open so that everyone has access, especially those who have often been overlooked and forgotten about. But you're right, absolutely. We need to have better economic policies that place jobs and give opportunities for folks. And again, it goes back to young people who are seeing these opportunities. In class is such a critical part of this. Indeed, in many inner city communities, what happened 30, 40 years ago is the loss of jobs that went overseas, and also you ended up with policies where people were able to move off into the suburbs and finally have economic freedom. One of the unintended consequences of the civil rights movement is that lots of extremely educated and successful African Americans were able to move in other communities to get more opportunities for their children. And unfortunately, those left behind didn't have access to the same role model. So if we can create opportunities where in urban communities and other areas, people can feel like there's chances and there's hope, indeed, I think a heck of a lot can change.
Well, I want to share with you a phrase I just coined in the last hour before we started. I referred to us as what is quickly devolving into economic hunter-gatherers. Our society seems to be devolving back to where we were when we were first wandering the fields of Ottavai Gorge. We're hunter-gatherers. We're really just sort of scrambling around looking for the next paycheck rather than developing a society. And I think that may be one of our bigger problems, Dr. Greenfield.
And there's a lot of wonderful people who are doing great things to provide access, especially for underrepresented populations, to get the STEM discipline training, lots of different things around this country. So I do believe that we do have hope. I do believe that there's a lot of possibility for progress, and that there's enough dedicated people who are saying that we need to change this. We're going to look at ourselves, we're going to look around us and make sure that everyone's getting a fair opportunity, and then we're going to maybe look to our government to say, how can indeed there be better policies so everyone has an opportunity? All we're asking for is equal opportunity for everybody. And whatever happens, if I give you $1 million and I get $1 million today, in 10 years, you might end up with a lot more than me or a lot less, but at least we have the same shot.
Wait, but see, Derek, that may be where you and I disagree. I don't think I think the government is actually the cause of this problem, because we're looking to them to fix a problem that really isn't a governmental problem. Just protect everybody's rights equally, and then go from there. I mean, we have that issue, but we will have to break at that point. But I will encourage everyone to go see you online. Again, it's DerekGreenfield.com. You come through Charlottesville at all, Dr. Greenfield?
It's been a while, but I certainly would love to get there, and it'd be great to meet up.
I would love to have you down this way. Dr. Derek Greenfield, thank you for joining us this morning, sir.
Thanks so much.